Hello, Irish fans, and welcome to this week's edition of the Jack Swarbrick Show. I'm Jack Nolan. On this week's show, we'll talk with the first Notre Dame woman to win the NCAA cross-country championship, Molly Seidel. And later, we will sit down to talk with former Notre Dame basketball captain and now Notre Dame academic advisor, Torian Jones. Normal co-host Joe Schmidt is still wrapping up a few days of R&R after his outstanding performance in the Fiesta Bowl, which means Jack Swarbrick will also have to put up with me over the next hour. And Jack, I am honored to be filling in for Joe today.
Well, it's great to have you, and I got a theory that Joe saw the wind chill for today and decided to stay put. But we look forward to having him back, but it's great to be with you, and no one wears more hats around here than you do, and communicating all that's happening with Irish athletics, and we thank you for all you do.
Oh, thank you. It's a delight. It's become really a love, a professional love. And you mentioned the wind chill, and I know there are coaching staffs on this campus which are like, don't talk about the weather, don't talk about the weather. But since you opened the door, let's talk about the fact that this campus now has so many terrific indoor facilities for virtually every sport that it really doesn't matter what the weather's like outside. There are plenty of places to train and play, even if there is a wind chill or lots of snow.
There's an occasional cold day, but no, that's right. I mean, I think we've continued to work on our facilities to make them better. It's there's always need for indoor space. Our operational choke point is the demands on our indoor space, but teams work together cooperatively to figure out how to get it done. Our coaches schedule creatively in terms of away and home games and getting themselves into preseason tournaments for the spring sports in warm places. So, I think far too much is made of it, frankly. Sometimes I kid that you hear more about it from Notre Dame fans than I do from Michigan fans or Syracuse fans or Wisconsin fans, none of whom have better weather than we do.
Well, in particular, if you want to play in the NFL and you watch the playoffs, they were played in some pretty cold weather spots.
It's a real advantage.
And we haven't had, in all honesty, with El Nino, we've got like 4 inches of snow, and we didn't have any for Christmas, so it's overblown.
It's been easy.
Question. But we are in the middle of the winter sports seasons, and certainly it's a monumental accomplishment. And when you look at the list of basketball coaches, both male and female, who have won 800 games, it's not a very long list, and our own Muffet McGraw just achieved that.
It is remarkable, and it is brought into context. Your introduction to that is so right by the other people on the list. When you take the 800 and the number of national championship appearances, you wind up with this incredibly small number that include, the Krzyzewskis and the Smiths and some guy coaches at UConn, I forget his name. And it's elite company, Pat Summitt, to be part of. But she's such an elite coach, and what she has built with this program, the consistency, she demonstrates a quality that we see in so many of our coaches, that whatever occurs in the year, whatever the talent mix, whatever the strengths, she's going to maximize it. She's going to find a way. And she had some roster changes this year and some injury things to deal with, and Muffet has just found a way, and here we find ourselves, in number 3 in the country with only one loss to number 1 and playing really well.
I know ever since you got here, every coach you have hired, you have talked about the necessity to be a great teacher. Now, most folks know I'm the men's basketball radio announcer, so I go to the men's practices all the time, and I know what a great teaching staff that is. But last week I did a game on ESPN3 for the women, and Muffet let me go to practice, and I was really struck just by what a great teacher she was. I went to some of their practices back in the late 90s when I covered them in their first Final Four, but it hadn't stuck to me to the degree, and I think she's become, maybe this is why it stuck with me, an even better teacher throughout the entire practice.
Well, Muffet talks about that. She talks about her evolution as a coach. She talks about in her early years, Bobby Knight sort of being, a standard for her, and over time it's become a much more collaborative process between an educator and her students. And in fact, that's what you have to have today. Kids are different. They want to know why. They want to understand why they're doing it, especially the young women and men we attract to this university who are so bright. And so our best coaches, very much engaged. I'm sure when we talk to Molly in a little bit, she'll talk about her dynamic with her coach, about how they work together collaboratively to become national champions, and that's what it takes. But again, it's part of Muffet's brilliance that she's evolved over time in that way.
And of course, I do all the men's games, and it's a really good men's team this year, but they haven't gotten the breaks, and quite honestly, they're missing a couple of great leaders that in crunch time, sometimes the leadership that was there last year hasn't been there completely this year. And I know that's something they continue to work on. Steve Astoria, who we've had on this show, was just named a captain by Coach Bray.
Yeah, he was, and he'll be a great addition to that group. And it's probably the least understood team dynamic in collegiate sports is the leadership component. It is the difference between success and failure year to year, and it's not a static thing. I mean, we bring very bright kids here, and we put them through leadership programs, and we do all we can to prepare them, but you've got to do it. You've got to be in that situation, and it evolves in the course of a season. I think you'll see this leadership on this team get better and better and better. I always tell our coaches, and I think it's playing out right now, you are most at risk in leadership the year after you have great leadership.
What a great point that is.
And we had great leadership on that team last year, so it's going to take a little time because the underclassmen didn't have to take on any of the leadership mantle, and now they get it all. And you got to figure that out.
And leading is hard. I know Coach Bray has talked to me about players who have come to him and said, This is exhausting. It's 24/7 because you become a sort of coach on the same level with your players. And I'm glad you said that, because if you hadn't, I would have. They had such great leadership on last year's team that, you know, you can watch. It's like watching a great sporting event, and you think you can do it, and then you go and try to do it, and it's a totally different thing. And it's coming along. And your normal co-host, Joe Schmidt, certainly, and his production, I laughed with him sometimes because he seemed to be a magnet for criticism from some of the fans and whatnot. And his Fiesta Bowl performance, I mean, 13 tackles, a game-high 10 solo tackles. Not only did he have the skill, but his leadership, just from an X and O and get guys riled up, follow me. Joe's one of the best leaders I've been around.
Well, he is. He's. I hope he doesn't see this broadcast because, you know, we don't want to compliment him. But he is an extraordinary leader. It'll serve him so well in the rest of his life. But you know, part of leadership, a big part of leadership in this context is setting the example. And Joe always set the example. No one ever worked harder at practice. No one was ever more on time, more focused. And, you know, for people who wanted to quibble with his performance, Joe was never going to say, I played this year with one arm, because he did. Those of us around the program knew that's what he was doing. His teammates knew that's what he was doing. But, you know, that's just what a good leader does. They don't focus on the things that are holding him back. They're just committed to a team victory.
Well, and a good leader does what Coach Kelly's sign on the wall says. You ignore the noise, that's basically what it is. Talking about another team that's getting good leadership, another one of the winter sports, the Notre Dame hockey program, playing very good hockey, getting great goaltending, but they're getting great play from their lines as well.
They are. We had a great visit with Coach Jackson last week, and you know, we're approaching some sort of record for ties in a year, but playing very well. And as we've talked about on this show, when you can build off a great goaltender, and we have one, you know you're going to be in every game, and it brings a real focus. And you're seeing that with this team. There's no hills and valleys to speak of this year with this team. They've been very consistent and really positioning themselves for a long run, I think.
Now, I don't know if it's a reflection of the intelligence of athletic directors that this is the time of year where you have lots of meetings to go to, many of them in warm weather sites, or you just have to be on campus for football. But you've got a really busy schedule coming up. And while the meetings might sound mundane to many, they're very important to the ongoing operation of college athletics in general.
Yeah, that's right. It is a bit of a challenge because they don't schedule anything during football season in this industry, and then you sort of get it all in the next several months. I'm headed this week to the NCAA convention down in San Antonio. ACC meetings around the corner. I just came off the college football playoff meetings out in Arizona. So it's a busy time, but it's important for Notre Dame to participate and lead where it can.
And let's talk about the college football playoff. I thought the championship game was absolutely terrific. The semis weren't necessarily that great, but what everybody's talking about were the dramatic drop in ratings. The semis were down 33% because they were on New Year's Eve. And I know that is an issue that you anticipated, but you also know why there's a legitimacy to selecting that kind of a schedule.
Sure. We absolutely understood it. The one thing we're sort of asking all our fans is, give this a little time. Let's see. Let's look after year 4 or 5 and see where we are. See if viewing patterns have changed at all. But we understood the issue. What we were fundamentally balancing, was trying to find that midpoint between going all in on the playoffs to the detriment of the traditional bowl system, or trying to find a balance point where you still protected some of that bowl tradition and built a vibrant postseason playoff. We may not have it exactly right, but that's what's going on here. It's let's keep those bowls on the days people knew it and work around them and see how that works. And I think that's so important not to lose sight of, because what we've seen in some of the other college sports is the postseason is so good and so vibrant that it's hurt the rest of the season. And we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen in football.
You played an integral role in the formation of this playoff. You're on the committee, as you just mentioned. So your day job, though, you want Notre Dame to be able to have a legitimate shot to get into the playoff after, now it's still in its toddler years, but from what you've seen so far, are you pleased, and do you believe that Notre Dame will get a spot if it deserves a spot?
Yes and yes. We spent a lot of time on the issue when we were putting this together, and we considered a lot of different ways, but we kept coming back to the charge to the selection committee needs to be the 4 best teams. No limitations, whatever data you want to use, find the 4 best teams. If 3 of those teams are in one conference, pick them. You find the 4 best. And as long as that's the context for the decision, we're going to be fine. I think we recognize the challenge of not having that 13th game, but we'll be okay with that.
And it certainly produced a great championship game. We're out of time for this segment. We'll be back with our first guest, Molly Seidel, right after this timeout.